Hold on, we got problems already. Okay, let's get this going here. All right, my friends out there, what is happening in YouTube land? Yours truly, Rockin' Dave, the real deal. North Fort Myers, Southwest Florida, and all that good stuff. Thank you so much for tuning in. I wanted to do this live stream, and that could be on too long. And I was trying to get on a little bit earlier, but things happen. So, anyways, I was just trying to get things all set up here. Actually, I was working on recording that little clip, and actually, if it was from the Christmas Eve party we did. And I posted that small clip on my Instagram page, Dave Byron Guitarist. And all I'm doing is panning through the setup with all the lights and the foggers and the DJ music, the DJ house music there. And there's a reason why I wanted to show you this, is because as the title implies, it's appealing to the next generation. I saw a video. Actually, it was a couple of videos. One was from our great guitar friend, Jason Stallworth. Let's see if I can see it. Let's see if I could get this straight here. Okay, someone's holding a message for a review. Yeah, I really appreciate people being courteous. I know sometimes people type in something, right? And then they're like, okay, I misspelled something, so let me delete that. And they're trying to, repost. And that's cool. But I really appreciate people being respectful with the language there, because we do have young kids that do watch our live streams, and I definitely want to be respectful to them and to the families and that. So that being said, and there goes my guitar pick. So, and this is really interesting because this topic is going to involve this next generation. The video I saw Jason Stallworth was talking about this, and actually, through him, I was referred to. Yeah, check out this guy's channel, Riff with Cliff. And Cliff was actually, I think it was one of the owners of this music store up in Tampa called Relay Music, and they were talking about the store closing. I think the store has been open maybe 10 or 12 years, but this guy Cliff worked for another music store. He's great at selling guitars. He's a great salesman, great guitar player. He's going to go strong with his YouTube channel. Overall, great guy. Same with Jason Stallworth. Great guitarist, great guy, great advice. Jason Stallworth is actively gigging up in Tampa. He'll do a lot of the acoustic stuff, mixes electric stuff as well. But he also plays metal, and he's a great guitarist. So if you get a chance, check his channel out. Well, so I watched Cliff's Riff with Cliff's video earlier today, a little bit more in detail about the closing of Relay Music, and you could tell it's a sad moment for him. It really is. It's a sad moment for everyone, because it's yet another store closing, like with some of these music venues closing, or the restaurant / clubs / breweries, they're closing, or they're going to do a shift in their music. Reasons that restaurants are closed, there's a lot more to it than just that. With the music, there's a lot more to it than that. But I'm going to focus this on music stores and some music stores in general. Part of the reason what's happening, in my opinion, and from what I've been seeing and experiencing, is that there is one reason that these stores are closing. There's an overstock of guitars and gear. I know Guitar Center down here in Fort Myers, well, it was about a year ago now, they had a sign on the door saying they're not taking any more used instruments because they got too much inventory. They can't get rid of it. But that has loosened up, and now they're taking more stuff. And I think so. That's part of the reason. There's overstock. The manufacturers have been pumping out guitars left and right. We just finished with NAMM show this past week in Anaheim, California. I wasn't there, but our community, the guitar community, and the music industry in general, had just finished with NAMM show. Now I'm going to talk about another quick channel pertaining to NAMM show, and this is all relatable to this topic. There's a guy, his name is Gary's Guitars USA. An older guy, owns a music store as well as other businesses. I think he was at the NAMM show, and he just had on his video an update of the NAMM 2026. And from what I've seen, it seems to be dwindling smaller and smaller and smaller. Smaller booths, some private booths, things of that nature. But it's interesting what Gary had said. There was a booth or section there that was spotlighting social media, whether it be YouTubers, Instagrammers, whatever. So they had their own section so they could start doing interviews. Smart move on the industry, because they're realizing things have changed, and it's like, okay, we got to keep up with these changes. And they were letting more and more of the younger folks in, and I thought he said they're trying to appeal to more of the younger folks, meaning they're starting to listen to what the new generation is really saying, what they really want. I think this is brilliant, because this is what's going to dictate how the music industry is going to move forward. When you have a decline of an interest, and this is part of the reason you're having stores closed. It's not just the overstock of inventory. You're having a decline of interest. We deal with a lot of kids on our driving job, and I'll give you a prime example. Friday, as I'm taking the kids home, we do the charter schools, and one of my students, she's 12 years old, she was talking about on Saturday they're going to have a dance at the high school. I thought, oh, that's cool. And I just out of curiosity, well, dance, obviously it could be dance music. So, what kind of music? Oh, it's good. dance music and that. And I made a joke. I said, because her dad listens to the same kind of music that I do, as well as the jazz fusion stuff I play. I still listen to metal. And I said, oh, is it gonna be like metal and stuff, like heavy metal? And she goes, oh, no, 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 that's too loud and that's obnoxious. And yeah, she says, it's gonna be real music, Mr. Dave. Now, she was not trying to take a pot shot at me. She was just saying her feelings. And I thought it was cute. But that statement resonated. That statement is so spot on from these kids' points of view. I don't know what kind of dance music, because you could say dance music could be anything. It could be similar to, well, here, let me just play a sample of what this is. This is one of our friends at the Christmas Eve party. He goes by the name of DJ Cosmos, and he does a lot of house music, and that's basically what this is. I'm not gonna play the whole thing, but you hear the rhythm? I could associate with it guitar-wise because of playing jazz fusion. Okay. So it could be stuff like that, or if it's stuff that is old school of the 80s and some of the 90s, okay. But the point is that there's little to no guitar in these recordings, especially this, the house music. So if the guitar has been absent from the kids to hear, and what's being more pushed on them, and I wouldn't say pushed on them, but what's being more populated to them, where they're more exposed to them. Well, the more you expose this, and the less you have this, they're going to start to forget about this. It's become the instrument of grandpa. And let's face it, I'm 62. A lot of our famous guitar players, Yngwie Malmsteen's 62. I think Steve Vai is maybe 65. I could be wrong. The fact of the matter is that what was of our youth is now getting older. And let's face it, some of our heroes have been dying. They're passing away. We lost Eddie Van Halen a few years back. We lost Ozzy Osbourne just last summer. We lost Ace Frehley from Kiss. And then we go further back, lost Gary Moore, and there's too many to mention. But the point is, they're starting to get older and they're starting to pass. Now you could say, well, yeah, that's why we need to have the tribute bands and the cover bands. And that's great. It does keep the music alive. But from the point of view of these young kids, and I'm talking from middle school and even elementary school, but middle school to high school and even to the college age, what they're seeing is, yeah, my grandpa plays. It used to be the dad band. Yeah, my dad plays that. And some of it is, if they're older kids, yeah, my dad plays that. But now it's turning into, well, yeah, grandpa plays that. And they look at it, well, that's kind of cute. For them, they look at it as it's kind of cute. We're seeing this almost separation of what used to be a pass on generation and generation. What we're starting to see and starting to notice is that for the guitar and into rock and roll and metal, because it's always associated with rock and roll and metal. Although, it is in country, and country music is popular now, but there's still a lot of kids that don't like country. And that's just how it is. I have yet to hear these kids say, I'm going to a dance and they're playing country music. No, it's going to be either disco or a revived version of it, or some of the 80s, or what I just played here, a lot of your hip-hop and house music. Let me rewind real quick to the mid-2000s. I remember when the Guitar Hero video game was real popular, and I was teaching at a music school, and boy, I had a lot of students. And a lot of students, in part, was based on the popularity of Guitar Hero video game. with the Guitar Hero video game and the Rock Band um, video games, it exposed these kids to a lot of the 80s metal and rock. That's why it got popular. So now, and I've seen this happen right before my eyes as I was teaching. So mom and dad, to get their son or daughter, and I had a lot of female students, the guitar, and yeah, it's cool. Now it's like this bridge between mom and dad's generation and the daughter and son's generation. Now they got something in common. They could have fun playing the video game, and now they could have fun actually playing the guitar, because what was happening, the parents started getting the idea, well, why don't we give our son or daughter a guitar? It was cool, especially for dad, because if dad did play, he's going to relive his youth again through his kids and be able to play the kids' guitar. Or, and this was the case, or if they already were playing, it was a good excuse to buy yet another guitar. And I figured, well, if our son or daughter doesn't play, then I'll play it, I'll keep it. Well, that popularity ran pretty, for a good amount of time. But what I started to notice is that when I would teach these kids, at the same time the Ozfest concerts were still going strong. They were like they were before their first decade of being in existence. And so the kids would go to the concerts. The kids would start to like bands like Avenged Sevenfold, My Dying Bride, Pantera, or my Valentine Forever. I can't remember the names, but a lot of the newer metal, some of the goth metal, some of the symphonic metal, which I thought was cool. So now I was witnessing, as I was teaching these kids, when the parents would be in the room with them, especially with their teenage daughter, which I had no problem with, and I would see, yeah, the teenage daughter, and so in this case, one of the teenage daughters, yeah, she was really cool, playing some Iron Maiden, that's cool, but then she wanted to play some Avenged Sevenfold. And then right away, either the father or the mom would say, yeah, but that's not real music. So right away, the daughter's hearing a cut down in what she likes. Right away, it's like going downhill, and there's now this separation again. In one particular case, I remember I was showing a riff from one of the songs from Avenged Sevenfold, which I have to relearn again. Anyways, I'm showing her, I said, I think this is what they're doing. And she was, yeah, I think that's it. So here's how you play it. Let's kind of analyze it. The mom is sitting right next to the daughter, and as I'm telling her this, I said, you kind of got that? So when she goes home, she's not going to forget. She said, well, one of my methods of teaching was trying to get the kids to do it over and over again, so that when they went home, of course, he'd write it down. And then later on, when he got with the smartphones, I said, yeah, you go ahead and record what I'm playing, so you could go home and review it, So, but that was one of my methods. So as I'm explaining to this girl, the mom leans into her and says, yeah, now see, listen to your teacher, you got this, right? Listen, he knows what he's doing. And I saw the girl's eyes roll, and I'm thinking to myself, okay, I have no problem with mom or dad sitting in with their teenage daughter in a room with their guitar teacher. At the time, I was like, 47, 48 years old. Not a problem. I was actively gigging then, as I'm still active, gigging now. But what I noticed is that as soon as I saw the girl roll her eyes, I saw some of the boys the same way, they're getting this separation between mom. They don't want to be mom and dad's generation. They want to be their own. So the reason why I'm bringing this up is because as time went by now there's no more of the Guitar Hero video game, right? So where are these kids hearing guitar music? With the exception of some. I had one high school student write with me last year. She plays guitar. Actually, I had a couple. She plays guitar, and she loves Pantera. And I'm not going to name the name of the music school she wanted to attend. It's very popular. But right away, they wanted to jam Beatles music down her throat and Rolling Stones. And she says, I don't like that. And I know maybe that could be their criteria because they put bands together, to go out and perform. And I get it. And I actually called to be one of the teachers at this school. And they were still in their experience. They were opening up a new shop. So I don't think they got it in order yet. So they never called back. Or if they did, they said there was going to be a wait because they're waiting to get the permit to open up the store or whatever. So I just let that go. But as time got further on and I started hearing what was going on with this particular school, I thought, geez, it's too bad I couldn't get that gig, or maybe I should try harder, because I know what the problem is. The problem is they're trying to jam stuff down these kids' throats that they don't want. Now, as far as the basics of learning, yeah, there is certain requirements you're just going to have to learn. But there's a way to teach the basics and get it to the point of view for the kids to that they're gonna like. Because if they're gonna like something, it's gonna be easier for them to understand, and they're gonna start to progress because they're gonna want to play. They're gonna want to practice. They're gonna want to analyze what you're giving them because it's something that they like to hear. So and again, you could say, well, this is a version of this song. This comes from this generation of music, and this is where everything stems from. It's coming from somewhere. And this particular guitar player in this band that you like happens to like this. We'll say that's why. But that's only if you're interested in learning about that. So, but just to give you the brief history, I would do that with the students so that they would understand. Oh yeah, it sounds cool, Mr. Dave. Yeah, that sounds cool, and yeah. So they would open them up. Sometimes when you're dealing with the new generation, you have to kind of go to their level and understand what they really want, because you could explain something all day long so they understand it, but if you do it in a way that's forceful, they're going to reject it. So as time is going on, and the further we're hearing guitar in some of this popular music, other than country, but again, not everyone wants to play country. When it's a lot of these kids are into this dance, hip hop, and house music and stuff like that, where there's virtually no guitar, or you might get a sample of a riff. Maybe you might get a sample of something like this, like this. You might get something like that, but you're not going to hear like really playing a role. One of the guitar players, very famous guitar players, who started to incorporate this, and this is early 2000s, where he was experimenting with some of the hip-hop type of stuff in his playing. I'm not talking about the rap metal that was of the early 2000s and late 90s. I'm talking about something that's more groove-oriented, was Carlos Santana. But you see, he has... his style is more of a jazz rock fusion, and in Latin music and some blues and that. So the relation rhythmically between this dance music and jazz, they're like this. You could really see where it's coming from. And a creative guitar player could see the opportunities. How could I bring the guitar into this? Because I'm already playing. It's like a pop version of jazz fusion from the 70s. Just done a little bit different. That's really what I'm seeing a lot. I'm gonna give you some examples of back when I was in high school, and in the late 70s when disco was still riding real strong. We'd have kids who would have T-shirts that would say "Disco sucks," and then the opposite team would "Rock sucks," and it was all like this battle, right? And I think this is 1979, local radio station, The Loop, FM 98, before it turned into 97.9 in Chicago. It used to be FM 98, where Chicago rocks. We had a morning DJ, Steve Dahl. Steve Dahl had his band called Teenage Radiation. Well, he got an idea at one of the Sox games at Comiskey Park, old Comiskey Park, that I think it was during the 7th inning stretch. He comes out there on the field. I don't know how he did this quick enough, because I wasn't there, but actually there to see this. But he got out there and he took a bunch of disco records and blew them all up. And of course, he got in trouble for doing that. And everyone was like, yeah, all the rockers, like, yeah, get rid of disco, kill disco, blah, blah, this, that, and the other. So he got in trouble. And then it wasn't too long after that I started to notice that we started hearing guitar in these kind of like disco songs. Because I went to Lakeview High School and I had friends that would listen to that on their boom boxes. And when I first started hearing it, it was, even though it's not, I guess, considered disco, but Lionel Richie, I don't know if it was on his own or when he was with the Commodores, had a song called Easy Like Sunday Morning. And in the middle of that song is a guitar solo. And then later on, I started noticing like artists like Gino Vanelli. He had this album called Brother to Brother, and there was, guitar. It was this, I don't want to call it disco. It was like maybe funk. But it was all borrowed from jazz, but it was more like pop, funk, disco with guitar in it. And eventually that led into Michael Jackson's Thriller when Eddie Van Halen, did the guitar solo, and it was like, hey, now rockers understand it. Now, when we look back at it, for people back then who hated the disco, they kind of like it now because they're realizing, well, they were actually playing instruments. They weren't sampling anything. It was all actually played instruments. And there was a lot of great musicians. So my point is that other than when Van Halen 1 came out and Eruption came out, that changed everything for the guitar scene. But there was this point in time in the 70s where rock music was going down. Even Kiss had that one song called I Was Made for Loving You that almost had a disco beat because they were realizing, hey, we got to start to appeal to this younger crowd or we're going to start to lose it. It really was coming down that simple. Now, we fast forward to today, and we're starting to see the same thing happen. 40 years ago it was 1986, and metal was ruling. It was great. We'd go to Guitar Center when it was first opening up, and we'd see the full Marshall stacks and all the amps. You don't see a Marshall stack at the music store anymore. And back then they used to have 5 of them. And it was awesome. And there was a lot of teenage kids going to Guitar Center. Myself, well, actually, I go to the Chicago Music Company before Guitar Center opened up, and you'd see a lot of young folks. You'd see some older, but not as much. Now you go to Guitar Center, you see more older folks than kids. And when you start to see that, then you start to understand, wow, the used guitar section is huge. Another surge that we had in the music industry was the COVID lockdown. But now that was 6 years ago, right? So people realize, maybe guitar playing's not for me. It's a little bit too rough. My fingers are hurting, blah, 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 So back went the guitars. And the more that you have this combination of a surge in musical instrument manufacturing to like flood the market, flood everything, and then when you have the lack of interest in playing, you're going to have a pile up. That's going to be a bubble that's going to, sooner or later, it's going to explode. It's just going to pop. Now, I said in one of my last live chats that you're always going to have these like recessions, it's always going to be like that. What makes it different this time around is with social media, there's way too much we could do at home. We don't have to do this. Where back when I was younger, it was not uncommon to hear people playing drums, practicing drums, a garage band, a basement band. They were all over. But then again, different time. We did not have YouTube. We did not have social media. And all this other stuff, big flat screen TVs. Well, YouTube will broadcast some of the concerts, so the kids, parents stay home and watch the concerts, So, how do we relate to the younger generation? One of them is, don't say to them, well, that's not real music. I mean, you could keep that opinion to yourself, but the more you put that onto these kids, the more of a separation you're creating. And if you're a music teacher, that's one of the worst things to do. Again, I remember one of the students, she loved Taylor Swift. And now this is going back to mid 2000s. I'm going to say, well, I started there in 2006, maybe 2008, 2009. She'd come with her music book called Red, and I don't know what it was. I will give her this, the respect of doing this, and the credit of doing this. One of the songbooks, when you look at a songbook Taylor Swift, you look words and music, Taylor Swift. You might have someone else in there helping her, but it was all her. And one of her music books had the notation, of course, and then they had the tablature. But it was the tablature of the vocal melody. And that was the first and only time I've seen that. I thought that was brilliant because I thought the best way to learn how to play solos is learn how to play a melody. And the best way to learn how to play a melody, play the vocal melody. And it'll always sound musical. So, but what I did, the point I'm trying to make here is that I did not cut this girl down because I'm not I don't hate her, but I'm not a big fan of her. I'm not going to go out and I don't see any posters of Taylor Swift in here, But I'm not going to put it down. The same thing with this house music. When I go at our friend's house, and if you watch the live stream of the Christmas Eve, you'll see people are strumming and singing, and you see the dance music. And at the beginning, I was jamming with the dance music, so I can relate to both worlds, and which is a real interesting position to be in. It really is, because I thank God I'm able to do that, because I don't shut one thing down and okay, I'm not gonna do this because now I hate it. If it's something I like, I'll check it out. If it's something a person doesn't like, you don't have to run out and try to do all that. That's not what I'm saying. But I'm saying this is in part one of the reasons these kids cannot relate to this anymore. They see it, and especially down here in Florida, if they're driving around to go to a restaurant, there's always someone that's old with gray hair like me. They're sitting on a stool strumming and singing. Nothing wrong with that. But in their eyes, that's what they associate it with. It's to such a degree that one of the charters I did, the girl, she was one of the counselors. She's a college student now, and she was on the bus watching the kids, and she made a comment. We were passing by one of the places, and they had someone set up, and they were playing and that. And she's looking at, that's embarrassing. These people are trying to be young again, and they get drunk, and it looks stupid. And she's not far off, because that's what happens in some of these places. And then in their mind, they see that, and they don't want to associate with it. It's really that simple. I know another verification of this, when we're downtown Fort Myers doing either the art walk or especially the music walk. Especially when we're in this one area, we're there for a while, in this one little nook area. When we'd be done playing, the place behind us right over there playing the house music. And the place is packed. Right around the corner, one of the places that used to have live music no longer have live music. I don't think they have anything going on. They open up the door. One area down here is playing house music. The area back up here, up on the rooftop, is playing house music. They're getting all the sound they want. They don't have to pay for anything. Smart on their behalf, financially. But I'd get these college-age kids as I'm playing, and one of the first things they'd say is, wow, that sounds cool. I didn't know you could do that with the guitar. In other words, they didn't know that this could also work in that kind of music. And then they make the comment, you don't sound old. Now, it's night out, so if I have my hat on, my bandana, they can't really tell. I got the long hair. I kind of dress the way I like to dress. And so it's like, I'm not like what they normally see when they go to these restaurants. But and with that being said, the style of music, what they're hearing, is very relatable to what they like to hear. And I think what could help, especially if there's anyone at these music stores and and teaching, don't disregard what these kids are saying. let me get back to what that guy at Gary's Guitars USA said. He said he saw that one part over at NAMM where now some of these manufacturers are actually listening to what these kids are saying. And I think that's brilliant because they are the next generation. Like I said before, our generation is getting older and starting to pass. And if we continue to force what our generations down these kids' throats, the more likely they are to reject it. And when that goes on, they're going to reject it so much that they don't want to see a tribute band to Guns N' Roses. That grandpa listens to that. That's what goes on in these kids' minds. They want something that's fresh for them. And unfortunately, what's fresh for them has little to no guitar. And when you have little to no guitar, that means, hey, grandpa plays that. Yep, that's grandpa's. And there's this huge separation. It's not cool anymore. And you remember when you were young, you wanted to be in with the in crowd. You wanted to be cool, right? That's what's going on with these kids. So, again, I think it would be worth people's, advisable to people who are going to have music stores, start to see what's happening, find ways to make your shop or your teaching abilities relatable to them. You know, bridge the two generations together again. That's what's going to help. Now, again, a lot of people don't like dance music. I get it because I'm still like my metal. But what makes it more different for me is because I do a lot of jazz fusion. I can relate to those rhythms. Instantly, I can relate to them. And if anyone does play jazz, you're going to know. And as a matter of fact, some of these people that are these producers that are producing music, they will sample some of the old school jazz records. If you look on YouTube, and you'll start to see there's one YouTube video I saw where this kid has the new, I think it's the Boss P6 sampler, and he's taken an album from his collection, old jazz, and sampling some of that into there, and kind of manipulating it a little bit, but it's still taking that. And the reason being is those old jazz albums had that groove, and I think what's happening is over the course of time, that groove started to morph into what we're hearing now with this dance music. So that's why these kids they can relate to it. Because it's the rhythm. The one thing that gets people going right away is the rhythm. The melody is very important. Right? It's very, very important. Don't disregard the melody. But as I see this part, it's instantly the rhythm. So if there is a way that people could start to say, well, you know what, that is kind of cool. Maybe see I could put some guitar parts to that. And I'm not I'm not big on jazz, or I'm not big on dance music, but let's see what I could fit to it. What happens is when you start to be able to relate to these kids, now they're going to open up their mind a little bit, and they're going to start saying, well, yeah, that does sound kind of cool. I do kind of like that. You're not battling against each other, stylistic wise and generation wise, because the more that happens, the more the separation is going to be, the more there's a possibility of seeing more music stores close. Why? Because there is a lack of interest. Now, I'm not saying that's the main reason, but that certainly plays a big part of it. And whether you deal with kids or not, if you have kids, talk to your kids, talk to their friends. Ask them, hey, what do you guys like to listen to? My advice, don't right away tell them, oh, that's not music. Oh, no, see, my day. No, keep that to yourself, because we all know what we had in our past, and it was great. But that time is over. Open your mind, just listen. You don't have to particularly like. Now, unless it's something that's, it's rude and disrespectful, and they're dropping the F-bomb every other word. That's not cool. That's not cool at all. But what I'm saying is, this other stuff, give them that benefit of the doubt, because that is what they're going to like. And if they see something relatable to start to learn how to play an instrument, then that could kind of open up the door for them. And then they could start to understand. Because one thing about teaching is that when you start to explain to these kids where things come from, you know, like I said before, this stems from this style and that style, and just it starts to create this other style. When you teach it in a way that you're not jamming it down their throats, they're going to listen with more of an open mind. And because of that, now it sparks a little bit of an interest. And now they start, saying, "Hey, Dad, or Grandpa, what was that band? Van Halen? Yeah, can I hear some of that? Or Iron Maiden, or Black Sabbath, or something. Can I hear some of that? Because yeah, that is kind of cool. I still like my dance music, Grandpa, but I think that is kind of cool. See, when you start to bridge the two, whether they're going to play bass, a guitar, a keyboard, or drums, whatever. The point is that when you start to bridge these two for this next generation, then it could start to snowball and grow again. You just got to be willing to do that. What we're experiencing. We're experiencing in the rock and heavy metal world. I'm not saying it's completely doom and gloom and going away, but from the point of view that I could see with this younger generation, what we're experiencing is the same as what our grandparents experienced with the big band jazz era. Before the 1950s, it was big band jazz, and before that, it was classical. I remember one of our gigs. We were waiting to get up and set up and play. We were in this like library area, and we were looking through these books, and we found this one book, and in one of the paragraphs, it was saying about it was about music, and it was saying, and it was a very old, article, and in that article, it was saying how the world is turning upside down with this new jazz music. This is noise. It was one of the composers and conductors was talking about this, how horrible this was. Well, it became popular and it became big band jazz. And what started to happen, here comes the 1950s with the rock and roll. And that started to push jazz out. So rock and roll started to grow and morph and become big and that. And now we're seeing with the rap and the hip hop. And the hip hop is actually borrowed from bebop. It's like now our style of music is considered old and outdated. And it's being replaced with something that is actually has ties into jazz. So you see how things will like roll, and they'll go in cycles. So it's just, I know this is probably something that no one's really thought about, but what made me think about this was Friday afternoon when my student was talking about her going to her dance with her parents and her friend on Saturday, and they're going to listen to real music, Mr. Dave. We're going to listen to real music. I did not find that offensive. I found it very interesting, that comment, because again, she's 12 years old. I'm 50 years older than her. She was not around when Iron Maiden and the metal days of the heydays and, Queensryche and Dokken and all those bands ruled. She was not around. But she's around today. So, just something to think about for anyone. Hopefully, if I could get on Griff with Cliff, and I'll send him a message and say, if you want to check out this live stream, and maybe it'll start to, spark his interest. Because I know he felt bad closing Relay Music. He felt real bad. He's been there. He's for the last 10 years, he was saying that he made all these connections and, made friends with all these people, and now it's so sad to see this chapter ending. And he did make the comment, just like Jason Stallworth said, one door closes, another door opens, Sometimes in that transition, it's like you're shell shocked because you can't believe, man, I spent so much of my time and I love doing this and that, but now it's over. Now, how am I going to go into the next thing? What does the future really hold, Hopefully he can get back into, working at a music store. And if that's being the case, he seems like a real nice guy, and he seemed like he was absolutely excellent at selling. And he's got a family of his own, but hopefully that if he could start to see where there could be an opportunity. It's like my wife, she says about with the stock market, when a certain stock starts to fall, everybody, they bail out. Oh my God. That's not when you bail out. That's when you start buying. Because if it's a solid, especially if it's a company that has a solid history, it's you go up and down naturally. When you want to get in, let's say, with Bitcoin, right? It's real popular. When Bitcoin was started, it was a mystery, right? Now it's worth a lot of money. If it takes a dip, if someone's interested in it, they might have an opportunity to buy, and then when it goes back up, their savings go up. Well, maybe it's not a good analogy or an analogy to understand, but in a way, if you could see what I'm talking about here, if you could relate to this next generation, hold their attention, don't cut them down. If you want to tell them about when you were younger, this thing, but you could always say, but that was then, and this is your time now. Give them that benefit of the doubt, and give them that encouragement. Only get involved when it's something that's dirty and nasty and all that. That's not cool. I don't know why these people want to do that. To me, that's a disgrace. You don't ruin kids' childhood. You don't. You don't ruin their innocence. You don't rob. It's just people do that. I can't understand them. And I don't want to. I think they shouldn't be around. They shouldn't be around to do all that. Do your stuff in private. Don't involve kids. But other than that, if it's a type of a rhythm that they're listening to that's not music, then you're going to expect to hear, oh, yeah, you're just old. And that's the truth. That's the truth, my friends. Anyways, I hope this has been helpful. Hopefully tomorrow we won't have any bad weather. We'll do our live stream, our live gig, and we'll kind of rock out. I am going to, before I forget, my next live stream that I do after gigging, I want to look at the calendar because I know we got another like 4-day in a row gigs coming up. But I am going to do a live stream video that's going to compare the Boss ME90 with the Boss ME80. I had someone in the comments on one of my videos asking, does that same feature that you're showing on the ME90 work with the ME80? It does. I'll give it a brief explanation right now. It does when it comes down to the manual switching. What the manual mode switch will do, if you're on a patch that you created, right? And with the control switch, let's say you hit the control switch and you were able to turn off let's say you got an overdrive sound, overdriven amp, and you got the distortion on. You're able to turn off the distortion and let's say a chorus and a delay. And back to like this, overdriven amp sound. Then you hit the switch and you got delay and chorus coming on. Now let's say you hit the switch, but you want the chorus and the distortion on, but you want to turn off the delay. When you hit the switch in manual mode on the ME90, you could turn off the delay, or turn off the delay, and it's that same patch sound that you created for that patch. And let's say you're done with that. You click that off. Now you go to a different patch. Let's say it's got a phase shifter and a little bit of delay and a clean sound. And you didn't assign anything to the control switch. Well, you hit the other switch to manual mode, and now you're in that patch. And now you can turn off your phaser and that, and you got your Fender Twin Amp on this patch. The other patch you had, let's say, a Marshall patch. So per patch, you could do that. What I noticed with the ME80 is globally, if I go to, it'll be that very last patch. So let's say the very last patch I had the Marshall sound, and I had a delay and distortion while I was turning it off, okay? And that was my very last settings knob-wise. Then I go to another patch, and it's a Fender Twin, and I got my Fender Twin sound. However, I want to do something different. I want to add a chorus onto it. When I go to manual mode, it's to go back to where I had the Marshall setting. And maybe it's hard to understand this, but I'm going to bring them out and have them side by side to show you what I mean. If the ME80 does that, then maybe I did something wrong with it, but I'm just going to show you exactly how that works. So that'll be on my other live stream that's going to be here in the studio. So anyways, my friends, I hope you're having a great week, rest of your weekend and all of that, and hopefully we'll see you tomorrow. And once again, I apologize so much for I'm not, saying hi to everybody individually. It's just that this is getting, I really, really, really wish YouTube would not do this, because it almost, for people like me, it makes it sound like I'm ignoring you, and I'm really not. I just simply can't see. They should have never done that. Got rid of, the live chats after the video's over. They should have never. They should have kept that. If you post up the live stream, leave the live chats up, because then I could respond to someone later on. You know what I mean? But now I can't do that because, or if there's a way to do it, I don't know how to do it, and they never, they don't disclose anything. You see, I don't trust in things I don't have any control in. I get these people that want to quit their jobs and be full-time YouTubers. Then they start crying and wetting their pants. They say, "Oh, now they changed some. Now I'm not monetized anymore. I should have quit my job." You think? You don't have any control of this. I don't. That's the way I look at it. Anyways, my friends, so I hope this has been helpful, and it's just, again, something to consider, something to think about. Anyways, have a great evening, and hopefully we'll see you tomorrow. Until then, rock on and God bless. Thank you so much for watching. Have a great evening.